anyone and like at this moment, like if you can like show your video, I think it really helps just to like see everyone's faces and kind of how they're reacting to whatever I'm saying. Just really appreciate that. But yeah, let me just share my screen. So can we all see this? Like, I'll give like a thumbs up if you can see my screen right now. Sweet. Cool. So I'm super excited to be here today to give a workshop on personal brand building. It's something that I really enjoy doing just because I love creating content. I love posting online, kind of sharing my story and seeing if other people kind of resonate with it as well. And so a little bit about me, if you don't know who I am, is basically I started my journey kind of interested in the startup ecosystem and space about 3 years ago. So after I graduated from high school, I was kind of unsure of what I wanted to do in terms of the pathway I wanted to take with my career and what I wanted to do. I know a lot of people at the time were kind of pushing me to go out and do like internships and work experience and like build a personal brand, whatever that meant, and like post on LinkedIn and all this sort of stuff. And so me being like quite fresh out of high school and not really knowing what I wanted to do, I listened to a lot of the advice that these people were giving me to like put myself out there on LinkedIn, reach out to people. And so I started doing that and ended up cold reaching out to a bunch of recruiters online on LinkedIn and was able to land a product manager job at Canva without necessarily having to go through a uni degree and kind of go through a lot of the hoops that people traditionally do. And since then, I also tried doing uni for like 4 weeks, realized that didn't really enjoy it, wanted to like learn and like do things by like starting my own projects. And so I started an organization called Next Chapter, where initially we provided content on careers and how to like create a fulfilling career online. And then which is now turned into a online Slack community. And now more recently, I've also started a design studio with kind of the intent of seeing how I can grow a business and like document that journey online to like 1 million ARR by the time I'm 21. That's kind of like how I've branded it. So that's kind of like pretty much sort of my journey. So like you can kind of see like that's like me posting on LinkedIn and then also like me trying to get into Canva, like tried to really get my foot in the door and just like build a brand to like the recruiters as like someone who should hire, who they should hire. So that's a bit about me and my background. In terms of today's session, really keen to chat to you guys all about like why build a personal brand in the first place, the key pillars to personal branding and how you should really think about it. And at the end, of course, there'll be Q&A and like you can shoot through any questions through the Slido link that Alaha will be sending through. But before that, I would love to people to kind of just like write in the chat like why they think building a personal brand is important and just like share their thoughts. I'm also trying to open my chat right now and I can't actually find my Zoom chat, which is really funny.
I can read them out for you.
Yeah, sure. I think that'd be great. We could do that, Laha.
So I said career opportunities. Raveen says having a voice. And Ryan says Mr. Beast can sell anything. Catherine says connecting with interesting people. Prashal says long-term game. Bella says clearly communicating your unique value. And a lot of people are just jumping on. So I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, cool. No, I love it. Yeah, so I think like to all those points, it's kind of like by building a personal brand, there's a lot of upside that you can get. So it can help your career opportunities, help build relationships, build a platform, and like all those things that people are kind of mentioning in terms of like being able to promote your business or like showing off your unique personality and what you can offer to like a recruiter and all that sort of stuff. So I think like people are quite clearly familiar with why building a personal brand is important in the first place. I would say like it's really kind of encapsulated in this idea of like increasing your surface area for luck. So it's like by building a personal brand, you can achieve so many other things that other people aren't normally able to achieve because you have greater access to like different connections and also like higher level connections in terms of like people can kind of see your credibility and are more willing to help you out as a result. You also just like have a wider net of people that you can touch, and it just widens a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise. For myself personally, I found that personal brand building has helped me even just make a lot of friends. Like I would say like a large percentage of my friends actually come from LinkedIn and Twitter, funnily enough. So I think there's a lot of like personal benefits that you can get from there. And I think like probably another frame that I like the most in terms of personal branding is we often hear this whole adage, like it's not like it's about your like who you know, in terms of like it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I think like what's even more valuable than that is like it's not who you know, it's actually like who knows you. Because if you so I think this is like a really important frame to like think about and like why there is such power to building a personal brand. I will preface though that building an online personal brand is actually not everything as well. So I will play a bit of devil's advocate because I think what comes before like being so concerned about building a personal brand is making sure like that you are like a person with integrity, like in real life, people can sort of see that you are a good person, that you have like that you're someone that people want to talk to and all that sort of stuff. Like I kind of think that those things precede building an online personal brand, because personal brand building is also like, it's also based on how you interact with the offline world, like how people know you in the workforce. Like your personal brand is like the summation of like how people perceive you, and that's not only online. And so like I have this sort of gif of James Corden, because I'm not sure if you guys know, but he's a character where he's very well known in Hollywood, mainstream media and all this sort of stuff. But if you actually search up online, you see a bunch of people who like branding is also like the summation of how people perceive you in general. And that's not purely based online. And in fact, like how you interact with people offline is probably more important sometimes, and like can make or break if someone will give you a referral to a job, and all these like important things, because that's how people actually know you as a person. And I have this gif of James Corden because even though he's like a huge Hollywood hotshot, all this sort of stuff, if you go on like Reddit or anything like that, you actually find out that people really hate James Corden because he's like a really mean person in real life. So that's just something to be mindful of. But for the sake of this workshop, we'll be focusing on online brand building. Cool. So the first part in terms of like a pillar to like personal brand building is this idea of positioning yourself. So regardless if you're like actively thinking about it, like you already have a personal brand as is, and you have one that's online and you have one that's in person. So if you like search up your name on Google, like things are going to pop up, or maybe nothing's going to pop up, which is also like telling of like your personal brand as well. Your social media will have search results, and you also have people who are just like, even though you might not like to think about it, are like talking behind your back, whether it's about good things that you've done or like bad things that you've done. So like people always have an impression of you. It's just about with positioning, how can we actively change this or shift this to something that's like more favorable to you, or something that you want people to perceive you as. I think like this is sort of an optional activity, and I'm not doing it right now for the sake of like timing for you guys. But I think a very useful and powerful exercise to do is like a bit of a personal brand audit. So like just like quickly search on Google, like what actually happens when you search up your name, like what sort of results do you find? And if anyone has any like funny results, feel free to like share it in the chat or anything. And I think another thing that's also really valuable is understanding like how people in the real world perceive you. So because if you haven't already started building an online presence, I think that's like one of the best indicators of like seeing how like generally people are talking about you. And so what I like to do every year, like one point every year, is just like message 5 friends and strangers. So like kind of acquaintances that I kind of know, but we're not that close. And I just like ask them like, what's your very honest opinion of me? Like sometimes ask for people to grill me as well. It's like also a really just great self-awareness exercise. So if you guys have the time, would recommend just doing that and seeing what happens, because that's like generally kind of the start of where your personal brand might be. Cool. So once you've maybe done this personal brand audit, I think what's the next best thing is actually understanding your goals. So I see a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to build a personal brand. I want to build a personal brand, but they're also like they don't know why. And I think as much as it's great to create content and all that sort of stuff, if you're shooting in the dark and you don't really know where you kind of want to lead it to, I would say there's no point. And like there's like more effective uses of your time, because I think there should be like a level of intentionality with how you think about personal brand building. So really just like write down like what are your goals? Like how do you actually want to advance in your career? Is it that you want to sort of become a really well-known software engineer, or get like a really great job as a senior product manager or something? I think having those goals quite clearly is useful. Or if like you're a founder, is it that you want to grow your business to like X amount of customers? Like what is that actual goal? Because that will decide the actual efforts that you put in your personal brand and to also achieve those goals. And then once you kind of know your goals, then you can kind of position accordingly. So your brand should ultimately align with who you want to be. And that audit can also act as a compass to help positioning yourself. And once we do that, we can start writing like what I like to call a positioning statement, or just like a sort of one-liner of how people describe you as. So this is sort of an interactive activity that I would love for people to just like grab a pen on paper and just like kind of write their answers to this with me. By the end of this, like I want us to have like a short, punchy elevator pitch of like how we would describe ourselves to someone, or like online on LinkedIn. So if you can all grab pens and papers. The first question I like want to ask is like, who do you serve? So like, what are the communities, organizations, tribes that you as an individual serve? Just like feel free to just like brain dump a whole bunch of words or like different people. And once you've done, like, would also love to see people like pop their answers in the chat as well if they're comfortable. So in terms of like what I mean by serve, I mean in terms of like the people that like you care about the most, or the people that like, let's say you want to create content, who do you want to create content for? Who do you want to help? Like maybe it's related to your job. So maybe let's say you're a VC, or like you work at a VC, maybe the people that you serve are like founders, or if you're a student, maybe you want to help other students. So that's kind of like what I mean by that. Cool. Alahas is I help early career people in tech and startups. Love that. Cool. And so the next question I want to ask is, so what do you actually do? So like describe like what you do in terms of helping other people. So we've like described who we serve, like how do you actually like help those people, or like, yeah, like what do you do for these people? Cool. Becca writes, my team at work in the startups, and your in-person friend groups. Cool. Alaha, you're creating a weekly newsletter and running a Slack community. Also love your newsletter. You guys should check it out if you haven't already. Cool. And then also, so how do you do what you do? So like, I think like this seems a bit similar to like what you do. But I guess this is just like going into like a little bit of a layer of depth here. Cool, Becca. So you document skills and processes that you do IRL, and share anything that also helps other people. Cool. And then the last sort of statement I'd love for you guys to just like jot down answers to is like why you actually do this. So like what is sort of the why, the emotional sort of driver behind why you feel the need to do this. Cool. Simplifying complex concepts. Love that. Also, guys, don't be shy. If you like have any thoughts that you want to share, like super keen to like hear what everyone's writing down. Yeah, so I think with this positioning statement, I think this is like all in reference to like what you want to do as well. Like, so it doesn't have to be what you're currently doing. And in fact, like I would urge it to be like what you intend to do as well, because that like creates the frame for how you want your personal brand to be. Cool, love that, Kira. Feel free to share your responses as well. Cool. So I think maybe that's enough time to have like jotted down some things. You'll also have access to these slides or like the recording afterwards, I guess, if you want to like look back at what these questions are. But based on these like sort of answers, I'd love for you guys to like now formulate what is your positioning statement for yourself. So this is like essentially what is the one-liner that you would describe to other people, and then people can also relay to other people. So for the instance of myself, I'm personally very passionate and very motivated by helping other people achieve a level of like financial freedom or sort of career fulfillment in like pursuing whatever they want to do. So like my positioning statement is I help founders, entrepreneurs, and students to start their own ventures and pursue meaningful work by, and this is what I personally do, documenting my own business and learning journey that hopefully inspires people to take action. So this is like my sort of like positioning statement and how I want to create content and a brand around. Some other examples might be, let's say you're a founder of a marketing agency. Maybe it's like you help founders, entrepreneurs better market themselves to their audience by sharing expertise in performance and brand marketing that teaches skills and enables them to grow their business. So So like that's another thing you might show. And like I have another example of terms of like a student. Maybe it's like someone who's like studied computer science and they want to like help other people learn JavaScript and build personal projects, and they share programming tips and tricks to help young coders feel more confident. So these are like some other examples of positioning statements that you can do. Yeah, I think Lorenzo, I think it is quite similar to an elevator pitch in terms of like the template, just because like the format gets the point across in terms of like what the why is behind it. So I think, yeah, that's a solid observation. And if anyone wants to share sort of their positioning statement, would love for people to like just like jot it down in the chat, but no pressure to as well. Cool. So I think with this, some also helpful heuristics to think about this whole exercise and positioning yourself in your personal brand is, I think like I like to aim to be a guide over a guru. So like in these positioning statements, think about how you can still remain personable and relatable to other people. People don't really want to be like, people don't really follow gurus. They follow people who like seem like they're kind of maybe a few steps ahead of the way and like want to help them out as well. So that's kind of where the thinking is. You can also always like reiterate on like this brand and voice and this narrative and the positioning statement that you have, because like people can forget. So like you can like totally shift and change what this positioning statement is over time. And in fact, I think it's very natural as you find something that is more relevant to your own voice. Cool. So that's kind of like building your positioning statement, and we'll come back to this as something that we use consistently across our brand. The next like pillar, I think that comes with personal brand building, and this is personal brand building, at least on LinkedIn, is like just like building a great LinkedIn profile and how to go about doing that. The reason why we're focusing on LinkedIn is just because I think it's probably the most relevant to this audience, and also is kind of the gateway to how people like see us in our professional lives. So I think it's important that we like have this sort of optimized and like we know how to like showcase the best side of ourselves on LinkedIn. And I find that like it's actually pretty simple, but it's the simple things that we get wrong, or like that we like kind of don't know how to optimize for, like maybe how to improve it to be better. But I think like the lens that we should be thinking about building a LinkedIn profile or like a personal brand on LinkedIn is really like, how do you create a profile that's going to stand out across the thousands of millions of other connections that people might have, right? And so like an example of this is like, let's say that I'm a student, and this example could apply to like founders, to like marketing managers, all this sort of stuff. Is like, it is so easy to just like put on your headline like what you do. And like we can see this, like if I search up student at UNSW, like you'll find like 81,000 results of like students from UNSW. And like while you can do this, like it also like tells people like nothing about who this actual person is and why I should care about this person. So like your headline is probably the easiest way to like stand out on LinkedIn, but people aren't optimizing it enough. So it's like, what are the things that make you unique? Like what in your positioning statement can you draw out to like create a really great first impression on your LinkedIn? And do you have like a call to action for it? Like I find some really like sort of bad or like mediocre examples personally is like if they just write like, this is what I do, like I'm a founder at our company, or this is my role. And I think like that works if, let's say you work at Meta, or like you're like a head of AI at like OpenAI or something, like that's like really cool. And like that's kind of, I can derive straight away like how interesting or like how credentialed this person is. But if you don't come from like an already pre-existing brand, like it's a lot harder to stand out. So I think like your headline is really just like a really easy opportunity to just like write about like what you can offer to someone. So for example, it could be that like if you're looking for a job, you can like be specific in terms of like what industry, and also like even using emojis can stand out. I actually had this experience where I was working at Canva and I was like, to be honest, a bit bored. So I just went on LinkedIn and decided to like change product manager into like product manager and like had a duck emoji. And it was crazy. Like afterwards, I had a bunch of recruiters and like people just like connect with me on a whim. And like just like saw an influx of like people noticing my profile. And so I think it's really just like the small things like that that actually add up relative to the sea of people on these platforms. Yeah, Canva with an M. Yeah, and like even if you're like a founder and all that sort of stuff, if let's say your like startup hasn't like raised money or anything, it might also be harder for your business to stand out. And people might not even know like what you actually do. So like even having like a one-liner of like what that business is could be really helpful. And like people, like if you cold reach out or like do some outbound sales, like people clicking through on it because it sounds interesting. So like every character kind of counts. I think the next way that like optimizing your LinkedIn profile that people aren't doing enough is probably just like your bio. I think this is like quite simple as well in terms of like your bio is like an opportunity to like share your story, like your own personal story. I think like personally when I see people who like talk in third person in their bio, like it just sounds a bit wanky and it's like it's so impersonal and like you just like stop relating to that person. So like just use the opportunity, the space to like even just like write about yourself. Treat it as like sort of like a diary to the world, you know. And I think like yeah, and if anyone like wants feedback in terms of like their bio or like headline or anything, like feel free to also just like reach out to me afterwards on LinkedIn. Yeah, more than happy to like give thoughts on that. But yeah, it's just like very simple, like don't have like a too short of a bio, otherwise people will know nothing about you. Avoid talking in third person, avoid chunky blocks of text that people won't read. Like use lists in space, offer reasons why people should follow you and like have a call to action. Like maybe it's that you want to grab coffee with other investors, like put that in your bio. It's like very simple and can just like help make you stand out because like 98% of other people aren't doing it. Yeah, non-wanky first person perspective writing person, yeah. Cool. And I think the last one, the last sort of LinkedIn optimization piece that I actually find like people like no one does is like having a solid cover photo. Like the amount of times I see people just having like this cover photo, like the default LinkedIn one, like it does not add to your profile. It's literally just like a bunch of shapes and your cover photo actually takes up like almost a third of your LinkedIn profile, which is like real estate that you could be putting like maybe like your business, like you pitching your business, or like what you do. Like you can quickly just go on Canva and design like sort of, hi, my name's blah, I'm interested in XYZ, and they'll tell me way more information than like a standard stock image would. So I would really also just like push people to like optimize their profiles and just like put a cover photo, like a photo of yourself can also just be really humanizing as well. Cool. And so the last sort of part or like pillar I think there is into creating a personal brand is like just creating value. So this is probably the part that people think about most when creating brand. It's like creating content, creating things that make you stand out, as opposed to just like optimizing your profile. And so I'm just like curious to get like a show of hands. Feel free to like thumbs up react on Zoom of like who's sick and tired of like seeing all of this sort of content on LinkedIn. Like the sort of like, I'm excited to announce blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so personally, like I have like a love-hate relationship with these posts. It's like like love this person, love what they're doing, like love that you were able to like work on this new venture or like win this case competition. Yeah, but like over time it gets really tiring, and like breaking news, like it's not personal brand building because everyone does it and it does not make you stand out in any way. I think like there is value in doing it and sharing to your network that you're actively doing things. But I think there are better ways to do it rather than just like going to your network and being like, hey, I'm actively doing things. Like you can kind of wrap a story around these achievements. You can share like, why is this important to you and all that sort of stuff as well. So I think like in terms of thinking about creating content or creating value to people, like people remember like things that like teach them things or like will entertain them or like makes them think or like makes them feel understood. Like it doesn't have to just be about like sort of your job updates and announcements and all that sort of stuff. And I think there's such a scarcity of this sort of content and this sort of stuff where people are willing to be vulnerable on LinkedIn that like whenever someone does, like people are just like instantly hooked or like think that it's like really interesting. So I think in terms of like creating value for your personal brand or to other people, it's just about like how can you share and give to your community and to like friends online is really just the frame that I go about whenever I'm posting on LinkedIn. So like some topic ideas that you can have is just like write about things that you're learning. Sharing relatable content and stories is also really valuable. I found like the times that I've like gone viral per se on LinkedIn is like literally just the times where I'm like sharing a problem or like a decision that I've made and like why I've come to that conclusion. And you'll find that like that honesty and like very authentic like thought and sharing that sort of stuff like is what resonates most with people because it is like real and like personal to yourself and like your brand, right? So I think like with regards to that, like that's like some ways that you can think about posting on LinkedIn. And also mindful of like time and like Q&A and all that sort of stuff. I would say my like final takeaways with like posting on LinkedIn and like creating value to other people is just like to keep sharing. Like repetition is what makes people remember. Like I think the first few times that I Cool. Hello. I think I'm back. I think the first few times where I started posting on LinkedIn, I found that people, like I would always be scared because I cared about like what people thought like way too much. But you realize that like when you scroll through LinkedIn and like social media, like you'll like scroll for like 2 minutes and you'll totally forget about like the first or like second, third thing that you actually saw, and you might actually just forget about everything that you consumed that day. So like I think in terms of posting and all that sort of stuff, like people won't remember. It's the repetition that makes people remember and makes your personal brand more well known. And you can kind of mold what that is through like multiple posts as well. I think another thing to think about is like you don't ever really stop building a personal brand. People will like always actively be talking about you, or not like always actively be talking about you, but like if you do bring up in conversation, like people will talk about the most recent thing they remember about you and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's the power of like engineering that a little bit when you like post on LinkedIn or like optimize your profile. And people can also see through inauthenticity. So like if you're posting about things that aren't really true to you, or if you're conveying your profile in a way that isn't how you actually act in real life, like the people in real life will see that. And that can also like spread to like people online as well. And I think the final takeaway to think about as well is like the biggest, like what you do is the biggest determinant of your personal brand and how people perceive you. So as much as like you can kind of optimize all these things in terms of profile and what you post as well, like if you do interesting things, like that will also reap interesting results for your brand because people will remember like that novelty and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much my sort of workshop on personal brand building. But yeah, open to questions now as well. I don't know if Laha, if you're moderating.
Super helpful. We got a couple of questions from the audience. And the first question is, what is the downside of sharing your journey in public and documenting your business growth?
Yeah, for sure. I found that like sort of the downsides of building in public is I found like sometimes like I'll just like I've posted like, oh, I'm burnt out. And then I'll have like a client reach out to me going like, oh my God, no, you're burnt out. Like, oh my God, can you even do like the design work that I'm like asking you to do and all that sort of stuff, which I found is like has been a little bit of drawback. But I've also been fine with it as well. Like it can affect like maybe the people that reach out to me because I am being a bit more vulnerable with my content. But I found for the most part, like it's kind of fine and like it hasn't affected me as much. I think another downside is like it can also be distracting to like what you're actually building as well. So it really depends like if you're the type of person that like benefits or gets energy from like creating content or anything. If you don't, like it might just be a distraction.
Yeah, cool. There's a question about for someone who's exploring two pathways, corporate versus startup, what should be the key in positioning themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I think in terms of like navigating between corporate and startup, I think it really depends on where you're at in terms of your career. Like if you're still like making that decision, I don't think that there is a huge need to be like personal branding yourself super hard in a certain way. In fact, I think you could just be like kind of upfront with what that is and just like and like share that sort of like decision making process online as well. Or alternatively, like I think depending on what sort of corporate business you want to go into and like how much they look at your LinkedIn, like it could be safer to also just like stick to the corporate branding as well. Like I think startups are like not as anal about hiring someone who is really into startups and brands themselves as a startup person compared to like maybe a corporate person is like about not wanting to hire like a startup-y person because they like will quit corporate or something. So yeah, but I think it really depends on where you're at. Like I don't really feel like there's a huge need to like be like I'm a corporate person, I'm a startup person, because like what does that actually mean? Like yeah.
Cool. The next question is about what should be your focus theme to create content about? So what do you do if your interest changes?
I think that's totally fine if your interest changed. I think it depends on like to what scale you've built an audience. Yeah, like I think as well, if you like go through it with the lens of like I'm a guide, not a guru, like you can totally change like what it is you're sharing, what you're learning and all sort of stuff. Like if it's through that lens of like, oh, I'm still learning, like I've actually found that I'm more interested in blah. Like you could also even just like share the thought process between like why you've pivoted. But if you have grown an audience, like it might just like come and at an expense of like your audience like not really like getting what it is that you think you're into. So yeah.
The other question is, do you have any advice on overcoming shyness and selling yourself and imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so I think like in terms of overcoming this, I would say it's really just through like kind of exposure therapy. Something that like not a lot of people know about me is when I was younger, I used to be extremely shy. Like I used to have a lot of social anxiety. I used to hate talking to people. I kind of taught myself to be an extrovert and learn how to sell things. And I think it's really like a skill that you adopt. Like some people like naturally are just better at it or like have just like been taught how like to feel more comfortable sharing themselves online and on like in person as well. And like but to me like that never came like super naturally, but like the only kind of remedy I found was just like to keep pushing through it and like just keep putting myself out there. Like with my first blog post and like writing online for the first time, I actually had a period of like 4 or 5 months where like I had this article, it was in my drafts and I just like was so afraid of publishing it because I was so scared of like what my friends would think and all this sort of stuff that I just didn't do it. But then after I like did it, like the next time became easier, all that sort of stuff. I think with imposter syndrome, like that is slightly different. I don't know if imposter syndrome ever kind of goes away, to be honest. I think you just like become better at coping with it, or just realizing that like honestly, the higher that you go, like the more imposter syndrome that like you'll feel, like unless if you have like ego problems, which is like honestly I think worse. So yeah, I think that's sort of my thoughts with imposter syndrome.
Sweet. The other question is about, can you build a personal brand around a hobby or an interest without hurting your work prospects?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends on what these hobbies and interests are. I would say for like 95% of hobbies, like, no, I don't think like it would affect your work prospects. And I think in fact, like, unless if the company that you're at is like really anal and like has bad culture, which I guess like you'll learn and like from like posting or like sharing stuff online, and probably like shouldn't really work at then if that's the case, is I think that like most companies kind of encourage it, or they're like they don't really care. Like it's either that or that. Yeah, but it really depends on like what it is that you're doing. And if the company sees it as a threat, then like yeah, I think like that's probably like a red flag for the company.
Yeah. The other question is, how will we be building personal brands in the metaverse? So it could be like under synonymous or something like that, which I've seen people do.
Yeah. That's the funniest question. I think in terms of building a personal brand in the metaverse, like I think we're already seeing it. Like it's not on like say LinkedIn or anything, like on like Twitch or YouTube, and like TikTok, like you see like deepfakes, you see like VTubers, you see all this sort of stuff. I think it would just like be that sort of like I think that'll like just continue. I don't think it'll probably go onto platforms like LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is like a professional networking platform, so it doesn't make much sense. But yeah, I think like we'll probably just like be making content and consuming content under pseudonyms, and like avatars and all that sort of stuff. But I am not an expert in the metaverse, so I don't really know. Like that's my hypothesis.
Cool. The other question is, how do you manage the content mix between entertaining, educational, and personal? Yeah, around those three. How do you mix them up?
Yeah, for sure. I think in terms of this, it depends on like your brand voice. Like I know some people on LinkedIn, all they post is like entertainment content. Like 90% of what they post is like jokes, like shits and giggles, and 10% is like actually insightful, educational. Like there's a recruiter on LinkedIn for like Mitch King, and he's like his posts are just like a bunch of just like jokes, and it's really great. But that's like his voice on LinkedIn. So I think it's just like thinking through like what you want your own voice to look like and sound like. I think like you can probably go like do like a 50% of your content is educational, and then maybe like 10% is entertainment, and like another, and like maybe the rest is like more thought-provoking and like personal sort of stuff. But I think it really depends. Like for me personally, I have found that I really like leaning into personal content and like more vulnerable content, because that's just like my voice and like what I want to share, because I want to be like quite raw and honest with like who I am and what I'm doing. So it's really like different for everyone, but like I think just think about like what is the most valuable for your audience as well. So yeah, or like even valuable for yourself. Yeah.
Cool. And for last question, I'm going to pick this one. For people who want to get started, do you recommend any specific platforms for brand building, like LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok? Like how do you differ content for each platform?
Yeah. I think it depends on your goals for like each of these things. Like I could break down each of these different platforms and like the benefit to it. But yeah, it really depends on your goals. So like for example, with LinkedIn, it works for a certain type of audience. Like you'll mostly find people in tech, finance. Yeah, I think mostly tech and finance on LinkedIn. So like if you want to build an audience around that, like would totally go for LinkedIn. Also depends on what sort of content you enjoy creating for. So like with Twitter, Twitter also has like an intersection of like tech and finance and VC startup, all that sort of stuff. You might enjoy writing on Twitter more if like you really like writing the sort of one-liner, like jabbing at other people sort of content, or like you like writing the threads. LinkedIn is more like if you want to write like longer form content. Let's say you're a photographer, well, Instagram is probably like the clear sort of platform for that. But like, yeah, so it really depends. And like if you want to like monetize on these platforms, like that's a whole other question. Like then you want to go down the like rabbit hole of like maybe YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, all that sort of stuff. But like I think that's going more into like being a creator territory and like where you kind of see that. But in terms of like why I post on LinkedIn, I think it's just like relevant to like my audience. A lot of my friends are on LinkedIn, where I post these things too. And I also just like found it really easy to just like get into it as well, compared to like say Twitter or something. So that's like my personal rationale, but I think it's like finding about like what your own reasoning or like for building a personal brand is, because the people that you want to attract like will differ depending on whichever platform you're on.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that is it. That's the last question for tonight. And if you wanted to stay in touch with Hannah, like she said, you can stay in touch with her on LinkedIn, send her your profile if you want, but a huge shout out and thank you to Hannah for this great session. It was a lot of practical tips that we got up here. And for those who want to stay in touch with us, please join our Slack community, and where you'll meet people like myself and Hannah and everyone else who's on the same journey and in their career in tech and startups. And with that, I will let you guys go. Thanks, everyone.